Hey guys, and welcome to today's message. So today we're actually starting a new series on the Sermon on the Mount. And it's basically a continuous dissertation on Jesus and what he has to teach. And so it starts in Matthew chapter 5. And so I want to jump right in at the very beginning because these first few verses are really, really important. And so I want you to view the entire series through the context of these first few verses. It's really important. So, like I said, very beginning. So Matthew chapter 5, verse 1. And just so you know, I'm using the Message because a lot of times we look at the Beatitudes and they are using some interesting words. So I thought maybe this might help out a little bit to help us understand a little more. So verse 1, when Jesus saw his ministry drawing huge crowds. All right, before I continue. So when Jesus was doing his ministry, he was feeding thousands of people and teaching to thousands of people. People just came from everywhere to follow after him. And there are places where we even see he had to get into a boat to form a literal barrier in between him and the crowd so he could actually have room to speak. So picking back up. When Jesus saw his ministry drawing huge crowds, he climbed a hillside. Those who were apprenticed to him, the committed, climbed with him. Arriving at a quiet place, he sat down and taught his climbing companions. So remember, like I said, there were huge crowds, lots of noise, people everywhere, and Jesus decides to climb up a hillside. And so now the only people who are about to hear what he has to say are the committed, the people who climbed up, who when it was not easy, when it wasn't difficult, when it wasn't the cool thing to do, they were the ones that climbed up the hillside with Jesus. And so there were only a few people who did this. And so it was actually quiet, and he was able to sit down and peacefully teach them as opposed to the crowds down below. And so a lot of times when people talk about the Sermon on the Mount, they think that he's preaching to tons and tons of people, but this verse kind of contradicts that idea. So there's a good chance that this message may not be for you, but that's okay. And maybe by the sheer fact that this is actually an online message, maybe we've kind of filtered out some of the people who only follow along just for the sake of following. But what Jesus teaches in the next three chapters is not for everyone, but that's okay. It's for a small group of people who are willing to put in that extra effort, who are willing to be committed to Jesus no matter what it takes. And so if you're here and listening, I really want you guys to tune in. So Jesus is about to lay out what it looks like to be a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, an active participant, one who is willing to follow Jesus no matter what, one who's willing to put their identity in the kingdom of heaven. But first, I want you to think back to when you were a little kid around Christmas or your birthday, and you got all your gifts, and you probably saw the big ones, and you were most excited about the big ones because you're like, well, bigger is better, right? And so on first glance, yeah, the big ones probably were really, really cool. But then there were also those small ones who, when you actually opened them up, they contained something absolutely amazing. And what you initially thought was going to be really lame turned out to be the best gift ever. And so what Jesus is about to teach is actually really, really similar. From the outside looking in, the thing that we think is valuable or that we want is actually something from a different perspective that we actually don't want or need. In fact, some of the things from the outside that looked like they were maybe the worst turned out to be the best things. So he begins to lay this out. And remember, he's speaking to a small group of people that actually climbed up with him, willing to get away from the enormous crowds below. And so starting in verse 3, he uses the word blessed a lot, or maybe I'll say blessed. It just kind of depends on what flows out. Same word. But in this context, the word bless or blessing really carries a lot of weight. It's not just a, oh, bless your heart type thing. I really want you to pay attention. It carries a lot of weight, and it carries tremendous value. So listen closely, and you'll notice that actually the things that he's blessing, we probably really want to be signing up for. So we're going to start in verse 3. You're blessed when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there is more of God and his rule. So none of us want to be at the end of our rope. We're all trying to get to the top of everything, not the end. But Jesus says you are blessed when you're at the end of your rope. When you find yourself so exhausted, so broken, so full of pain and agony that you have nothing left. If someone were to ask you how you're doing, you'd say, I'm at the end of my rope. I'm hanging on with all that I have. There's no more rope left to hold me up. And life has crushed you, and you are there with your entire capacity spent. And Jesus says, blessed are you when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there is more of God and his rule. Meaning that when you get to the place where you're at the end of your rope, you're so broken and shattered that there is nothing left of you. For the first time in your life, you may actually cry out and pray to God. You may actually depend on God. You may actually pray to God for him to be in charge so that it's not you anymore. You may pray to him, your will be done and not mine because I can't do it anymore. Jesus says, when you've gotten to that place, blessed are you. Verse 4, you're blessed when you feel you've lost what is most dear to you. Only then can you be embraced by the one most dear to you. So maybe you've been through that. From the outside looking in, you've lost someone who's most dear to you. Maybe they moved away, stabbed you in the back, they died, or it was a divorce. When you've lost the one that is most dear to you, none of us would want to sign up for that. But here Jesus teaches, blessed are you when you feel you've lost what is most dear to you. Only then can you be embraced by the one most dear to you. Because in that moment, the person that you've sought your security, your comfort, your joy, the person you could be yourself with, when that person is gone and you have no one else to turn to, blessed are you because when you turn to him, you will realize that he's the one you're supposed to turn to in the first place. It was only through God's goodness, through that person, that you're actually enjoying in the first place. And now, instead, you are actually turning to God for those joys and those blessings. Verse 5, you're blessed when you're content with just who you are, no more, no less. What an amazing encapsulation of everything we go through in life, everything that defines us, every decision, every motivation, every step we take, every thought, every goal. It's all about getting more or getting less. But Jesus says here, blessed are you when you're content with just who you are, no more, no less. That's the moment you find yourselves proud owners of everything that can't be bought. Meaning when you finally take ownership of the fact that God has fearfully, wonderfully, and beautifully made you, no matter what you look like on the outside, from the inside looking out, you are exactly who God made you to be. Verse 6, you're blessed when you've worked up a good appetite for God. Think of all the things that we have appetites for and the things that we put in our stomachs, that we put in our minds, that we put in our bodies, in our hearts. You're blessed when you've worked up a good appetite for God. He's food and drink and the best meal you'll ever eat. You're blessed when you care. At the moment of being careful, you find yourselves cared for. Think of how simple that is. When you just actually care about people and stop focusing on yourself. When you actually care about people and how their day is going. Imagine what it'd be like if you actually took the time to care about other people. And not just some fake concern, but genuinely cared for other people. What you'll find all of a sudden is that you are then cared for in return. All of the people that you cared for initially are going to be the first ones there when you need that care. He paints a picture of who you are supposed to be, but not everyone, but only those who climbed up the hill to follow him. This is exactly who you are supposed to be. Verse 8, you're blessed when you get your inside world, your mind and your heart put right. Think of how much time we spend on our outside world. The world tells us to get a better body, get the good grades, get on the sports team, get the first chair in band or orchestra. But Jesus teaches, blessed are you when you get your inside world put right. Because after all the pressures of trying to get the outside right, we then tend to binge on the things that destroy us, that destroy our insides. And he continues, when you get your inside world put right, then you can see God in the outside world. When you get your head and your heart right with God, you can see him moving in people's lives. You can see God creating opportunities for you to build relationships with other people. You can see God placing you in positions of authority so that you can shine his light to others. In verse 9, you're blessed when you can show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight. I know we all have that one friend who just loves to stir up drama or create fights or just continue anything and make everything ridiculous. But Jesus says, blessed are you when you can show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight. That's when you discover who you really are and your place in God's family. Because the children of God are peacemakers. They're not instigators. Verse 10, you're blessed when your commitment to God provokes persecution. The persecution drives you even deeper into God's kingdom. So for when you are persecuted for God, because you are a peacemaker, people are going to, and you have your insides right, people are going to want to persecute you. They are going to want to come after you because you have your insides right. When you live this way, the persecution will only drive you deeper into God's kingdom and his comfort. He continues, not only that, count yourselves blessed every time people put you down or throw you out or speak lies about you to discredit me. What it means is that the truth is too close for comfort and they are uncomfortable. You can be glad when this happens. Give a cheer even. So when we live in truth and we walk in light, when we walk alongside people who don't, it makes them uncomfortable. They have to come up with a way to criticize you or ridicule you. They have to come up with names to call you to make themselves feel better about themselves. When they realize they aren't doing these things and they realize they are shallow and they have to turn on you to make themselves feel better. Their actions are simply validating that you are walking in the truth and the light, and it makes them so uncomfortable. He continues, give a cheer even, for though they don't like it, I do, and all heaven applauds. And know that you are in good company. My prophets and witnesses have always gotten into this kind of trouble. Basically, he's saying, welcome to the club. So maybe you're listening to this and maybe you're uncomfortable. That's okay. But for the few of you who are willing to follow Jesus, when it's not the cool thing to do, when it takes time and effort and motivation and pain, and this message is for you. Blessed are you. When although it may seem like from the outside looking in, things are going wrong, God says you are blessed because it draws you closer to him. At the end of the day, that's where you should be anyways. All of these things bring you closer to God. Blessed are you when you find yourself in the midst of these things. Let's pray. Amazing Lord, we thank you for deciding to give the Sermon on the Mount, for taking that extra effort to climb up, and that it was for the people who are willing to follow you. I pray that we would be one of those people who are willing to follow you when it's not easy, when it takes a little extra effort, that we would realize that even when we are viewing things as maybe a curse, but they are actually truly blessings, and they bring us closer to you and draw us closer into your kingdom. So I pray that when we are dealing with those persecutions, that you would bring us the joy that only you can bring, and that we would realize that and know that it is because of you that we're able to get through these things. So we love you so much and thank you for everything you're doing through us. And we love you and praise you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. See you guys next time.